Hello, and welcome to a very special Pride edition of the Grow Your Occupancy podcast. I'm Julie Podewitz, and today my special guest is Josh LeBlanc. Josh, welcome to the show.
Hey, Julie, thank you for having me.
Hey, Josh. This is, one of my favorite months is June, Pride Month, and for many, many reasons. And I really appreciate you jumping on. Tell me a little bit about what you do for a living.
Yeah, so I am the director of sales and marketing at a franchise group specializing in reconstruction, restoration, really just helping people when they need help and their time of need.
So restoration and their time of need, where they live, or maybe if things have been destroyed. And
Yeah, it can be where someone lives. It can be their business. So really, it's just if there's a fire, if there's a flood, storms, anything that really hurts a building structure, that's when we come in and kind of say, okay, work with your insurance companies and how can we help you? How can we get your house back so it's something that feels like home again? Or if it's a business, how do we get it back up and running quickly so that way you're not downtrodden by loss of income, right? So it's
wow,
helping them when they really don't know who's going to help.
I mean, that sounds rewarding.
It's a great company that I work for. I'm not going to lie. It's good to know that what you're doing is making the world a better place in some way. I always believe that leave this world better than you found it. And I think this type of an industry just allows you to do that.
That's a great philosophy. I do too. And I think we can, by being kind, just
Yeah.
to another person, we're leaving things better than what we found. I mean, and that's a very basic, should be a fundamental. And then we are segueing here into Pride Month. We know that that's not always the case. But anyway, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But since it is Pride Month, I was wondering if you could tell us just a little bit about you from a personal story and maybe a little bit of your coming out and your journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So a little bit about me. I am born and raised in the state of Rhode Island, small state, small town. And as far as my coming out, it took me a while to grapple with telling my story because my story, I feel, is not the quintessential, unfortunately, or the traditional of heartbreak that so many people my age experienced. And their stories do need to come to the forefront so that way parents can grow and youth can grow and understand that it does get better when it's hard. I was very blessed with having two very supportive parents very early on in life. And even as I'm in my 30s, I'm noticing times when I was 6 or 7 and they would just embrace what I wanted to do, but protect me while I was doing it. So an example is I wanted to be the Pink Power Ranger so bad when I was 6 years old. And rather than my parents saying, absolutely not, that's for girls or for boys, they said, absolutely. At the house with your friends, no problem, wear that. When we go out, you're going to wear the Hercules costume this year. And as a kid, you don't understand. You're like,
Oh,
well,
you
what?
didn't?
No. Well, because at 6, you're like, well, why? That's not what I want to wear. And then you hit your 20s and 30s and you look back and say, they were letting me be who I wanted to be, but protecting me at the same time while I was still too young to understand if other people didn't protect me. And I think that's so important to, especially as kids who grow up in other areas. I'm from the North, I'm blessed. There are other areas in this country and in other countries where they don't have that same safety in public. So for parents to know you can keep your kids safe and educate them and protect them inside and outside the home is important. It doesn't have to be the same way inside and outside the home. So yeah.
So you were very fortunate.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you grew up feeling safe.
I did. I had parents who gave me opinions, but led me where I wanted to go, and never shied away from my sexuality or being involved in a community or I was a cheerleader, I was a dancer, never felt a stigma. And that was before I came out officially at 14. They embraced that opportunity for me. My dad was a cheer dad. He used to sit in the front row with his t-shirt on. So yeah, I feel like they were just what you imagine good parents to be, wanting the best for their kid and steering them the right way.
Pride is pride, right? And we of course we equate pride and Pride Month, LGBTQ, in my humble opinion, human rights, but the
Yeah.
rights of LGBTQ. And we need to have these awareness, these special times of awareness, because there's still plenty of room and plenty of, places for individuals and, us as a society and a world to embrace humanity, something that in my, again, opinion should just be a basic right. And you mentioned your parents being very proud of you, and isn't that as parents, right? Is that to embrace and be proud, period, right?
Yeah.
And you mentioned, being wanting to do cheer or wanting to, and in I mean, there's so much, always to unpack. It's such an important topic, but why not? Like, and whatever your sexuality is, if you want to cheer, you cheer,
Yeah.
I don't know if we as people sort of have this preconceived idea, that boys don't wear this type
Yeah.
of costume. My gosh, we still are blue for boys, pink for girls, and it's a shame that, and there's nothing wrong with being pink for girls. We have a girl in her look like her room, we threw
Yeah.
up abysmal. But there's also, if you wanted to wear tutu to school. However, it sounds like your parents were aware enough to think, oh, perhaps others aren't as accepting, or would
Yeah.
our child be ostracized if
I think in the 90s, even the idea of heteronormativity wasn't a concept, right? Because that's just what life was in a lot of senses. And then early 2000s brought opportunity to understand gender studies and what is it to be a female versus male. It's not a color, it's not your clothing. High heels were originally worn on men, not women, back in the 1700s. So I think for my parents and me being in the 90s, they didn't have a concept of this is for boys, this is for girls. They had a concept of what are people going to say, but how do I not take my kid's creativity away from him? How do I allow him to be whoever he wants to be and shape the world around him? My dad always said, like, be true to yourself first. And that allowed me to do so being young. Didn't mean being gay was always easy for me, I will say. Like, I think though I had accepting parents, it was harder for me to accept it for myself, knowing that in the early 2000s, I wasn't feeling like I was the norm in a lot of ways. I think media played a large role, where it was, you often hear like my gay best friend or the gay guy. It's like, okay, so it's a minority that is held to you're fabulous, but you're still a minority and you still are different from the average, which is a very uncomfortable feeling for anybody.
Interesting. I don't like the words like normal and average, but statistically,
Absolutely.
Heterosexual, it would be the greatest percentage, right, of people. So we assume, as we're growing up, oh, do you have a girlfriend, or does Abe have a boyfriend? Number one, I don't know why that's important to people, but it seems to be when you're like 14, 15 years old. Like, I would never ask somebody
No.
question, but it's almost like when someone's a senior in high school, say, where are you going to go to college? Right. Yeah. We're sort of that's certainly not the only path, and it's not necessarily the right path. It's a large entire. Yeah. So like, do we being the gay guy, right? Or being the minority, only as a woman, and women were still minorities, but that's got to feel, you do have to feel like the odd guy out sometimes.
Yeah. And I think, and to your point, what I'm hearing you say too, I think women have felt that for centuries, right? And it's slow and it's chipping away, and it's one step forward, three steps back. And I think that's what we're experiencing now. Is early 2000s, it started to gain more traction in the media, our community, my community, and it has continued to grow. I mean, mainstream media nowadays is so embracing, but that doesn't stop other areas from taking two steps back when you look at politics and you look at those types of topics. So
Yeah.
every fight is two steps forward, one step back, but it's important to recognize both sides, I think.
Right. I mean, if we're only looking at the back, we're going to be in a
Yeah.
state of frustration and anger,
And,
even.
yeah, anguish. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So what would you say, like, why, what did you feel, you said, my parents, and it wasn't that difficult to come out, but it was more for myself. Like why was it because you felt like the minority or, okay.
I
Okay.
think there's that. And I think especially among youth, doesn't matter how much confidence you hold, when other people tell you what you are, that is diminishing. And so there was being a cheerleader before I'd officially come out or anything of that nature, being told that I was gay by other people almost makes you psychologically want to go the other way and say, well, I'm denying it. That makes that coming out process so much harder. And I pray and I hope that the youth of today, from what we see and from their exposure to it, hopefully don't have that same issue, for lack of a better term, amongst their peers. Peer pressure isn't just telling you to do something, it's telling you who you are.
Interesting. And I mean, can you try to imagine how impossible this journey would be for folks? And there are many, many men and women who don't have supportive parents.
Yeah.
In fact, a real strong knowledge that they would be ostracized and in some cases thrown out of their homes. How hard, I mean, you're grappling with, and you're pretty comfortable with yourself. You have parents who love you no matter
Yeah.
what. And you're still, it's still difficult. How, and that's why I said the suicide rate. And I mean, it's just how the youth that don't have, like, we love you unconditionally, but not really.
Yeah, it's not
Like,
unconditional.
yeah, it is. Of course, it's conditionally. So how do you help? Have you had any experience, like maybe helping another person or knowing somebody that's gone through a real
Yeah.
challenge like that?
Yeah, I think we all do, really, and we just don't know it until the time comes, right? So your first kind of question I heard was, can you imagine? I can't. I genuinely can't, even knowing their stories. So I've had friends who have been so afraid of coming out or have come out and do not have contact with their parents, their families at all, right? There is no way to help other than I found to let them know that there is chosen family. Family is not blood. And so that doesn't necessarily ease the pain of what they have felt, because a lot of these times I've met them as an adult and I wasn't there during this tumultuous time in their life. But letting them know that they can still have a family and still have people that love and care and would do anything for them unconditionally, because chosen allows for unconditional. I don't necessarily believe that the family we're born into completely and utterly gives you unconditional love. There are obviously blessings and scenarios. I know with your family and my family, yes, and my partner's family, but not always.
Mhm.
And I think there's, again, holding on to the stigmatization of family means unconditional. I would do anything for you. Well, no, not necessarily.
Which has got to be so incredibly impossible for us to even believe. I mean, I had an unconditional and have an unconditional mom. I had somewhat of a conditional dad, as long as you went to school and you did this and you got straight A's and you did all these things. And I have a tiny, like, sort of kind of inkling, right? But I magnify that by, and like you said, and I love the way you said it, Josh, that it doesn't make it to say, look, I love you unconditionally. When your parents, or your sisters or whomever, you can't erase that pain.
No.
It's and acknowledge that pain, and hopefully, like you said, just adding your unconditional love helps ease it just even slightly. Because you can't like saying, oh, your parents aren't worth it anyway, does not help.
It doesn't. You can't ever fill that void for anyone. And
No.
having friends is always important. My biggest thing is advocating for education and for media, because there are shows now. Well, there's a couple things. So there's shows like RuPaul's Drag Race, and different shows that really embrace the community, that allow for those stories to be mainstream. So kids in small towns know it really does actually get better. And this is that on a level you couldn't maybe dream of right now. All you have to do is get out, and you will get out one day. And then there's organizations like the Trevor Project, and knowing that those are out there and that they exist is so important. And the best way to know is through media and through kids knowing that there is an outlet that will help, protect, serve you, just to be you.
You know, I love what you're saying. And there's a show on Netflix, and yay, it's been renewed for 2 seasons, called Heartstopper.
Okay,
You've seen
I haven't
that,
heard
have
that.
you?
No.
Stop what you're doing right now. Go on Netflix and watch Heartstopper.
Okay.
And what the show is fantastic. It's a UK based. It takes place in England, I believe, and it is a story. They're teenagers, and it's a teenage love story. It's a comedy drama, right?
Yeah.
Without you just watch it, because it just normalizes. It's everything that you see in a teenage sort of a love dramedy, with the angst and then this and then that. The 2 leads happen to be 2 young men, right? And I just love the show, and it is a great show. Everyone should watch it. But I just love that. Yes, of course, the fact that they're gay is part of the story, but it's not.
Yeah.
Not
their whole story.
It's exactly, and it's like we need that. It's like the gay best friend. It is. And how often is in every single movie
That narrative.
The white girl has the African American gay goofy great friend. I'm like, I want that friend. None of us have that friend.
No.
It's like, why does it have to be? I love it. I love we've got some diversity, but we need to take it up a notch from like the silly goofy gay best friend.
Exactly, because to that point, that creates this narrative and this story of that's the whole person. Being gay is all of Joshua. That's just a very small subsect, right? And that, to your point, that's what that creates.
And I, as a heterosexual, have never had the experience of, and I'm not an actor, but oh, Julie, the heterosexual, talk to me about your heterosexuality. Like, well, it's so personal, and I guess we are just who we are, and in why we can't, on one hand in the media, and at least, like you said, at least there's some representation, at least, gay marriage between, cross our fingers. And on the flip side, right, it feels like you said, we've progressed in so many ways, and then we're like squeaking to a halt and going backward in others. I just, where do you think that comes from?
Fear.
Of what?
Fear of the unknown. I think oftentimes what we see is, and not just in this situation and with LGBTQ AI plus community, but it's around the world. The fear of something you don't have any experience or empathy for creates a dichotomy of anger and aggression. And the reason I feel that is oftentimes we see the legislations that come out or the attacks on different communities from areas who don't have any saturation of that community. And so for them to speak on somebody else's experience in their life to say, I don't think that's right, I don't want that around, well, that's probably actually not around you, because realistically, I'm not going to live where you live for fear of you. And so it's a fear of unknown. It's a fear of not having control over that and of becoming a minority, I think, right? Often we
Mhm.
hear of this group is taking over the US or this is happening, this is happening. So your fear, what I'm hearing that person say is you're afraid of living in the world that I had to live in my whole life. You're afraid of not being the norm anymore. Because I'm not
Interesting.
going to hurt you. There's nothing I can do.
Right. Of course not. Of course not. It's like catchy. I mean, I fear this, and I don't want to keep awake at night. But this book banning and we can't say stuff in schools, and it's like it's catchy or something. And I mean, I haven't been in high school for many years,
Yeah.
or middle school, but I highly doubt that people are okay. Today we're going to learn how to be LGBTQ AI plus. It's so unbelievably absurd, in which what we should be doing, or what I would want to see happen, is like the Heartstopper show. In history, if we're talking, we're not making it the story or the point. If we're talking about, uh, a person, or the what's the gentleman's name who was it helped practically helped win World War II for us. And there was a movie made of him. He ended up committing suicide because being gay, you could be castrated still in the 60s in the
Oh
UK.
my gosh. I'm not
Oh,
sure.
right. I'll think of it in a minute, but like that is a history. You could just talk about this. Like, I didn't realize the impact, because there was a statute of limitations on confidentiality of with war and
Yeah.
spies and everything. So we talk about history without having to talk too much about his first name starts, last name starts with a T. His sexuality. Now, it does have a terrible ending because he committed suicide, but can we say died by suicide because of what was happening?
No.
That's just a historical fact, right? Why is that a bad thing to talk about? Why? And I think you're right. I think it's that fear. And we're banning books, and I'm no historian, but just look back a few years here.
Yeah. I mean, there's books that are written about the future, dystopian societies where we ban books. So I think that's always comical. And that's more than likely a banned book now. And I think there is so much miseducation that occurs around these legislations as well. And the one that always comes to mind, it's very poignant right now, is the anti-drag bills that are happening.
What is up with this?
So many people that I've spoken to, and I'm an advocate for this, don't realize that bill and how it's written and how those states activate it is absolutely an attack on drag community. It is a larger attack on the trans community and trans women specifically. That is an attack on them and those individuals being able to live their lives in the same human rights way that we all are as Americans. Because if a trans woman were to walk down the street in those states, they could be arrested purely for dressing in a misgendered clothing. And it's heartbreaking.
Heartbreaking, maddening, tough to stay in the state of being so frustrated, right? But companies grow your occupancy, and grow your compassion, grow your love, grow your acceptance, and in the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. I just, Josh, have to go back to, who cares what clothing, like if somebody wants to dress up or whatever, or if they're trans or what does it matter to you? I understand it intellectually. I just don't get it. I don't get it. It's like if you wanted to be a mechanic, what? Great, right? Even if you think that that's not a good career choice, who cares? They want to be a mechanic, or fly in space. I mean, what is it? Why could we not just leave each other alone?
No, and it's the epitome of judging a book by its cover at that point. That person hasn't spoken to you. They haven't said a word.
It's complete racism. I mean, we're going back to lynching people.
And it just, I always try to make the funny piece of it of, are you going to let a clown read to your children? Are you going to let a clown walk down the street? You don't know what gender a clown is at that point. They're a clown, but if they're a fabulous clown, if they
Oh,
do their makeup really well and
right,
they put more than a red wig on, well, now it's bad. It's like, okay, so you can't be a high-end clown.
right.
Only low-end clowns are legal. It's just insanity.
I think the clown analogy is a great one all the way around, honestly.
Yeah.
What
It's-
advice would you give a young person going through kind of identity and kind of learning who they are and maybe struggling?
Yeah. I would say that's a very good question. I would say try to find an outlet as soon as you can that you feel safe. And that can be theater in schools, that can be cheerleading, that can be a sport, that can be, an outlet can exist anywhere. When I was in the 8th grade, before cheerleading, dealing with identity, I went into math leads. I am not a math person. If you ask anyone that works with me, I'm a calculator guy. But I knew that the people in that club I had made friends with, I trusted that teacher, I had a safe space to start figuring out who I was. So just look around and know there is going to be at least one safe space for you. Find it soon as you can. Yeah.
That is great advice. And I appreciate so much you sharing and allowing me to vent a little bit here. I feel a little
This has been a great
relieved.
conversation.
We all got to stick together and continue to grow our minds and our learning and our education around all of these things is extraordinarily important. And we could just continue to grow our love, because that's really what it is, right?
That's the root of it as well.
Yes. Thank you again, Josh. And thank you all for listening to the Pride edition of the Grow Your Occupancy podcast. I'm Julie Podewitz, and we will talk with you soon on the next episode. Thanks, Josh.
Thank you. Bye.